Welcome to the Gary and Kenny Show. I'm Gary Kroger, coming to you from America's heartland, the state of Iowa. I am joined by Ken Seisler in the state of California, America's what? What do you call it where you are? Calabasas, home of the Kardashians.
Calabasas is an interesting place to live. It's
I lived there for 20 years, not in Calabasas, but LA. But I always think of where you are as like the Old West. I see dusty hills.
Yeah, there is Old West. They do, and there's a thing called the El Adobe, which I think in Spanish means the adobe.
The adobe, right? Yeah, Our guest today is Doug Herzog. Now, he looms large in the life of Ken Seisler. He is a former president of Viacom Music and Entertainment Group, who oversaw MTV, VH1, Comedy Central, TV Land, Spike TV. That career of his spans about 4 decades now. I think 40 years.
And it's also over.
Well, we could all say that. But 40 years ago, he started.
It doesn't span anymore. It just came to a.
It's not spanning. All right.
No.
It was a 40-year career that started.
But he ended on the high note of. He ended on the high note of Quibi.
Yeah.
We'll get into Quibi. But you started in 1981. I know these things because I can Google at CNN and then Entertainment Tonight, where you were a segment producer. You went to USA Network. You greenlit our friend, my particular friend, Andy Breckman's series Monk. Andy's a very good friend of mine.
Okay, so I know Doug from MTV, where it was me, Doug Herzog, and Judy McGrath were the core product management group. I don't know what the product was, but we were managing it.
You ran the studio.
That's right.
I was doing what little original production we were doing outside of the studio. Mm-hmm. And Judy was doing all the on-air promotion. And we were the core product management. We were everything around the videos. That was us.
Well, was this the beginning then of core product management? Because you are largely responsible for moving MTV into more than just music.
Well,
was that the core product?
The core product was the what we were doing every day, with VJs and music, honestly. And this was actually kind of just before we sort of moved whole hog into original program, which I was assigned the task of leading that. But honestly, it was Bob Pittman and the folks who were running MTV who decided it was time to look. The general idea was, the novelty of videos had kind of worn off. We were starting to get a lot of distribution and therefore get rated by Nielsen. And the Nielsen ratings and the data and the research showed that people would flip channels a lot because, let's say, they didn't like the Cyndi Lauper video that came after the Duran Duran video that came after the Culture Club video. And the powers that be decided we needed to keep viewers around longer, create, as they now say, we didn't say it then, more engagement. But that's what it was about. And we decided to do a series of 30-minute shows, 30-minute shows to test the waters, which at the time, Kenny can attest this, was a very controversial decision because, MTV was a music station. It was like a radio station. It only played music. Right. To this day, I still run into people who are pissed off about it, believe it or not, 40 years plus later.
Well, I'm going to bring this let's jump to the present day, where on Facebook there is a group, I think you belong to it too. It's called I Work at MTV When It Was Cool to Work at MTV.
Is that really a group?
What bugs me about that group is most of those people did not work at MTV.
Oh, really?
MTV was cool because I think we're talking the cool years were like the first. I don't know, from 81. I think Kenny, you were probably there at launch. I came in 84, and so the cool years was that that sort of first run, maybe to like the very tip of the early 90s.
But it's not cool to work at MTV. Is MTV even relevant anymore?
It's not cool. And look, MTV is not, what it was. I'm not here to bash MTV. I would just simply say that, when Kenny and I were at MTV back in the heyday of the 80s, the golden era, and I try to explain this to young people or my kids, it's hard to imagine, but MTV was like Snapchat, Twitter, right, YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, you name it, all rolled into one. It was the center of the universe for young people, and if you weren't watching MTV, you were out of it. And it owned the demo, it owned the universe in a way that I don't think any platform or any brand can own it today. And it was a moment in time.
I'm curious whether or not all these channels will survive. You have the History Channel, which doesn't have any history on it. You have Arts and Entertainment that doesn't have any arts or entertainment.
These channels, the answer is they're not. As I like to say, survival is not mandatory. Some of these brands will figure out how to, iterate in the next evolution of what's happening with streaming media. Look, I think MTV feels like a challenge. Comedy Central, for instance, I think a lot of equity left in that brand, not what it was, but I think there's a way to to figure it out. Same with something like Nickelodeon. But then there's channels like TLC or Court TV or even a VH1. Like, I don't know what happens to those going forward.
I want to ask your perspective on something. Now, this is a question that Kenny and I have asked comedians ad nauseum, and we're all maybe sick of the question. But
can we get a hat? Is that the question?
What's that?
When we ask for a hat, is that the question?
We ask for a hat. Now, Saturday Night Live just is getting flack for cultural appropriation. I just heard Billy Crystal say, look, comedy is too dangerous. I don't know what to do. David Chappelle saying nobody can be woke enough to satisfy woke culture. So, you being at the forefront of comedy shows, Comedy Central, Jon Stewart, Colbert Report, South Park, Key and Peele. What is your feeling about, can those shows exist now? Can they thrive? What can they do?
My feeling back then, I ran Comedy Central 2 different times. Once, early on, so like 95 to, 98, 99. And then I came back again in 2004, and I was there, through the beginning of 17. And, my point of view in those days was, we felt like within reason, we were, flying with a little air cover in that we were a comedy network and we were trying to be funny. Yes, we were certainly going to offend some people along the way. There were lines crossed. There are things we certainly did that.
But there was no Twitter, right? There was no Twitter.
Twitter was just starting Twitter was going as I was leaving. Like, I remember, the Michael Richards thing had happened while I was still at Comedy Central. Even Anthony Jeselnik, he, I don't know if you know who Anthony is, but he's a brilliant, dark joke ninja. Yeah. And he's just incredible. And he goes to the darkest places and most unexpected in the most unexpected ways. So in the immediate aftermath of the Boston Marathon bombing, he tweeted something, and we actually went to him and made him take it down. Because it just felt like this is too soon. And he had a show on Comedy Central at that point. But I used to feel pretty good about our ability to navigate the culture and stand behind the fact that, we were doing comedy, and that, yes, you might be offended, and my attitude was, well, don't watch. But the landscape has changed dramatically. And, I don't know necessarily, not sitting in that seat anymore, how I would navigate it and manage it. I think it's pretty difficult. Like, I talk to comedians all the time, and, they don't want to play college campuses anymore.
Right.
Too dangerous, too many rules. They're over it. I wonder going forward, something like the Comedy Central roasts, which are just filthy, and filthy and wrong, right? But all in the name of comedy. And I just wonder whether you'd be able to kind of do one the way you'd want to do it in 2021 or 2022. Yeah. But that's, as I like to say, not my problem anymore.
Not your problem. Well, I gave an interview to someone who asked about Elon Musk and if I thought that he should host the show Saturday Night Live because it was so controversial. And of course, there was controversy, and some cast members didn't want to be involved. But I thought, wait a second, if a satirical show isn't controversial, where's the satire? I mean, it should be okay that the host is controversial, regardless.
Yeah, it was it was a different world, and we outside of the very rare occasion we never apologized for anything. We always felt that was once you start apologizing, you'll be apologizing to everybody all day. I remember getting a letter there was this guy. It was one of those big Christian organizations that was always hounding Comedy Central.
Don Wildman.
I think
Don Wildman.
And he was just all over us all the time. And I remember getting a letter from him about South Park. And we had done an episode where we we're making fun of Jesus, which they did always. Jesus was a character on the show. And he's like, well, you would never, I'm sure you would never make fun of, Muhammad or Martin Luther King or Mahatma Gandhi. And I wrote him back. I'm like, clearly you haven't seen the show.
And thanks for the ideas. Yeah,
I'm going to interject because I wanted to mention this, that and to Doug's credit as well. When I was at Fox Lab, I shared an office with Trey and Matt. Yes, and they had worked. Brian Graydon actually found them at the Colorado Film Festival. They had done a musical about the Donner Party.
That's exactly right.
Which is probably a precursor to
and they were Columbine graduates, right? Not just as a little side.
Matt was.
Matt was, okay.
Yeah.
Matt was.
So anyhow, I shared an office. They did a few things up for us. It never really worked out. And it got to the point where they really weren't doing much except hanging around. And I mean, I think they were writing Orgasmo at the time. But I did share an office with them. And they did a little cartoon of Jesus having a snowball fight.
Jesus versus Santa, the spirit of Christmas.
Exactly. And Brian Graydon said, well, let's at least send it out as a Christmas present to us, as a holiday present.
On VHS.
On VHS. And I sat there with him, and we all sent out the VHSs, and one went to Doug.
Well, no, actually, the way the story, and you'll know this person as well, Kenny. I was out in the Comedy Central's LA offices, which were in the towers at Century City, and our mutual ex-colleague Debbie Liebling said to me, "I have something you need to see."
Oh,
and
okay.
She showed me the tape. And I thought, oh my God, that's the funniest thing I've ever seen. Can I watch it again? And she rolled it again. And I said, look, I don't think we can do that. I was wrong because they did do that. But we need to be in business with these guys. And that was that. And our stiffest competition was, everybody in town had seen this tape. It got, Brian Graydon sent it out as a video Christmas card. Everybody started making tapes to send to their friends. Everybody was losing their minds over it. It went viral before viral. And, the big competition was MTV. And I said to them, look, I just came from MTV. I can tell you they're targeting, teenagers, and they're not going to let you, between their standards department, their advertisers, they're not going to let you do what you want to do. We will. We're going after an adult audience. You should come to Comedy Central. Comedy Central at the time, MTV at the time was MTV. Comedy Central was nothing. Benny Hill reruns and,
that's right.
and Dr. Katz, God bless Jonathan, but that was about it.
Yeah.
And the reason I said I want to give Doug a lot of credit for it is because there was discussion among people as to whether or not there was a show here. But a lot of people, and including myself, thought that the animation was too primitive. That the reality that with kids today and the high-tech graphics that were out there, that you really needed to how could you compete for them when there's so much incredible animation, a new computer generated animation out there, that with this very simple one-dimensional animation.
Well, they were doing like cutouts. And,
they were doing cutouts.
I mean, it was really a primitive process.
And the reason I give Doug so much credit was he recognized that the material, the substance of the material, was more important than what it looked like.
By the way, first rule for Comedy Central, first rule of comedy is always funny first.
Right.
Doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter where it comes from. If it's funny, then you have a place to start.
Right. We used to say never cut funny. That was the basic thing. But, those guys also reset the bar. They reset the Etch-a-Sketch of animation with that simplicity, because I've got a bunch of kids, and they love the simple cartoons the most.
Well, if you watch South Park today, they're very proud of it, and they should be. I mean, the animation has evolved dramatically over now almost 25 years, believe it or not. And the show looks beautiful, really does. It's and they're still doing it, and they're still great guys, and they're still as wickedly funny as they ever were.
Well, I am curious whether or not the Kenny that Matt and Trey killed every week was based on me.
No, but I will tell you, okay, so I'm the idiot. This is a true story.
Oh, okay.
So they're sitting in my office, staring at me with cow faces. They're like 20s. Early 20s, right, Kenny?
Yeah.
And I literally say to them, I swear to God, I go, so do do we have to kill Kenny every week? Like, it feels like kind of like mean or something or weird. And they're just staring at me like I have 3 heads. And I just dropped it. And I quickly learned, you know what? Just let these guys do their thing.
Yeah. Doug, where do your kids find comedy?
My kids are big my boys in particular, big comedy fans. I would say the apple does not fall far from the tree. They love stand-up. They love animation.
Stand-up. I mean, I know not pandemic-wise. Let's pretend that we didn't have the pandemic. Did they go to comedy clubs? They would go. Yeah.
One of my sons went to comedy clubs a lot. He has a couple of friends who, have been in and out of that business, and he just enjoys a bunch of. They love animation. They love that Adult Swim stuff. Right. They loved, growing up, they loved everything on Comedy Central.
I guess the thing I'm getting to,
and a lot of podcasts.
Okay. The other thing I was getting is that when we were growing up, I mean, I hate to be so old, but the truth of the matter is, a comic was on national television, did 5 minutes, and they were famous. You either heard them from the radio, but we all had the same kind of comedians. We all knew who Alan King was.
Because we all watched the same guys on TV. Or the
exactly.
Same TV.
Joan Rivers on Ed Sullivan.
I could not name right now who the young new guy.
No, my kids would be happy to tell you. They follow a lot of them. They follow them on Twitter. They follow them on TikTok. They follow them on Instagram.
But how do they find it? I mean,
in our day, Kenny, we watched Carson. Mm-hmm. They would appear on some variety shows and maybe some late night shows. There were comedy clubs. There weren't a lot of them, and they weren't like they are now nationwide. There were comedy records.
That's right.
Everybody owned, George Carlin,
Richard Pryor, Robert Klein
records, and Robert Klein records, or even when we were younger, Bill Cosby records. When it was okay to like Bill Cosby.
Right.
But the platform is things like TikTok. Now, I'm addicted. I'm discovering new comics. Now, I know that the clubs are coming back because there's nothing like having drinks and there's a comic on stage when we can. The clubs will come back because all of these TikTok videos, these little short snippets, are highlights from an act in person. But they discover them from just doing TikTok.
Well, I'm just curious, if you're at Comedy Central today and you're looking for the new hip comics, I suppose you're going to be all over TikTok.
We'd always looked in the clubs. But
you looked in the clubs, but you're swiping.
Be looking at social media.
Yeah, you're swiping and swiping and swiping and swiping.
Yeah. I find them on dating apps and
Does comedy, Does Comedy Central do stand-up comedy much on the, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly were when I've been gone now almost 4 years, but it was certainly a staple of what they did then. I'm assuming, it remains. It also is, one of the cheapest, most efficient things to, sort of shoot and produce.
Right.
Louis C.K. has a show coming back out, right?
Oh my God! You think so? He's going to be.
Snippets are already. He did clubs and filmed it, and it's being put together. I've seen snippets on his website.
Well, let's talk about that.
The woke nation gets a hold of that.
Exactly.
He comes right out. He comes right out, and he says, "Okay, do you want to talk about it?" And of course, the crowd acknowledges what it is, and he just lays it on the table, and then he moves on from there. I think he's coming back. I really do. He just says, "Look, that was my thing. If that's your thing, don't ever do it."
Okay,
don't ever do it.
Doug, if you were at Comedy Central and he said, I wanted to come back on Comedy Central, your thoughts?
I'm not sure we could. It's interesting when I've throughout my career, I've had, I had 2 hiatuses, where I was sort of between gigs. And the first time was during the .com boom and bust, where it literally looked like everything was going to change. This was, at the 2000. And, then it kind of boop and nothing changed. And then all of a sudden I found myself, back at a cable job. And even though the .com boom and bust came, not a ton of change. Digital kind of entered the picture and was in the back of everybody's mind. But, the .com thing didn't take off at that time. When I went to Quibi after leaving Viacom, I had taken about I take about a year and a half off, kind of smell the roses, do a bunch of travel, and have a great time, honestly. And when I got back to Quibi, I felt like the landscape culturally had changed dramatically. A name would come up and somebody would go, well, we can't work with that person. Right. Well, why can't we work with that person? Because, 5 years ago, that person said this or did that. And so
It's brutal out there.
I don't know. And by the way, the generation, the folks who are out there working these days who are younger than us and come from different generations, and I think have a different point of view than we did coming up. I think like the staff of Comedy Central today would look at
Louis C.K.
and go, maybe not for us. Yeah. I don't know, but I guarantee you it's a discussion.
Yeah, no, it's amazing.
You brought up Quibi, so Quibi's on the table now. You brought up Quibi, so what happened with Quibi? I know that Jeffrey Katzenberg said that it failed because it launched literally when we locked down.
It didn't. Look, with all due respect,
and explain Jeffrey, what it is. There's a lot of people who don't know because I didn't get the app because I didn't want to be embarrassed when I couldn't pronounce it.
No, it's it was Jeffrey's vision. Turned out to be a slightly misguided idea, if not completely misguided. Certainly at the wrong time. The pandemic did not help. But the pandemic is not the reason. The world did not want Quibi, right. Which was basically premium programming on your phone in 10-minute bursts. If I could just boil it all.
I still think it sounds like a good idea.
No, but the reason is,
it's an idea that I don't think he completely figured out and didn't get enough time to do so. God bless him, though. I mean, he was amazing to me. He got the whole thing up. He raised $2 billion. We made a ton of programming. He hired some great. He's amazing individual, executive, in person. But this was a swing and a miss.
But you could find all that stuff on YouTube. YouTube had
then there's the other thing. Then there's all the other sort of downscale stuff, or the cheaper stuff that you can find on social media everywhere that everybody's doing. And Jeffrey did not want to do more of that. Plus, nobody's going to pay for that because that's all free anyway. So we were sort of betwixt. Like I said, we didn't figure it out, and so therefore it didn't work. And it was like running into a brick wall. And it came and went. We left the office 3 weeks before we launched. Amazingly, we did not skip a beat. We were ready to go. We launched into the pandemic and with a giant thud, honestly. And by October, that was April, a year ago. And, by October, it was all over. It was probably over even before then. And it all seemed like a fever dream, but it was all over.
And we never went
back to the office. We never saw each other. I mean, it was like a fever dream. It was almost like, did that actually happen or did I just dream that?
You talked about your 40 years and you made a joke. Okay, it's 40 years in a capsule. What's the rest of your day? What's the rest of the week?
You're looking at it. I will. I'll be surfing. I'll be surfing the dating sites here for a while, and Yankees come on at 4:00 every day. We have dinner on the table at 5. It's just like living in Florida. No, it's I'm very involved with I do a little sort of board and consulting and advising. I'm very involved with the trustee of my alma mater at Emerson College,
which I want to talk about.
Let's talk about it.
I'm advising and consulting a lot of little tiny companies, and here's how it works. Generally, either somebody I know calls me and say, "Will you talk to this person?" And then I talk to that person, and if I like them and I like their idea, I will say yes. I'll see if I can help you out. And then as we go into it, when sort of meetings get scheduled, if I don't have when I see the meeting on my schedule, I keep going. So that's what I'm doing.
Trying to get there.
And I used to have these great jobs I was so fortunate to have in my career where I was the boss, which was certainly fun, and got to lead and manage, which is what I wanted to do, and work in the creative ecosystem. But I got to scratch a lot of itches, right? I could be the leader guy, I could be the boss guy, I could be the creative guy, I could be I could find all kinds of slots to sort of kind of keep me satisfied. And the way I look at the world now is I do these certain things for certain reasons, right? So I do I do the Emerson thing for a reason. I do this particular company for a reason. I do that particular, so I can scratch. So I used to be sitting at a buffet, kind of all you can eat, and now I'm in an a la carte world. And I find these experiences one time. I'm trying to cobble together an existence that kind of keeps me interested.
I want to be you when I grow up, and I think I'm older than you are. But I admire you. I admire you. Talk about Emerson.
Yeah, well, the thing I want to bring up about Emerson is I assume that a lot of people, it's it's very different now what kids are studying as far as trying to get into the business. And
well, they actually have a comedy program now, the only one in the country.
Oh, okay.
I wonder what
this is what I want. This is what I was curious about, whether or not schools, when Emerson, I think, was mostly towards broadcast, teaching broadcast.
Mostly three big things there. It was, radio, film, television,
right,
theater, and what they call communication with disorders, which is
right. And I went to NYU, film and television. I'm just curious whether or not they're still teaching the way they did, or did they have to reinvent? They have to be teaching them something different, because a lot of those things are just they don't apply anymore, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's all evolved. We were, the guys who were my, I remember, I worked, one of my professors was a guy named Dan Lounsbury, who was a big director and used to, I forget the name, he used to direct one of those famous network, dramatic. They were almost like live stage plays every week.
Maybe like Playhouse 90 and that.
Yeah, like Playhouse 90, like literally, like Playhouse
Star
90.
Theater.
Right.
Yeah, like exactly. And he was, and so, it just, and then, I actually, more gravitated towards the younger professors who were there, who were actually, doing some stuff I could actually relate to. And I think it's just all evolved. But here's the thing.
Well, I don't know if
if you're going to film school, you're going to TV, to study TV, their technology is changing and culture is changing. But, I think we probably all agree, good storytelling is good storytelling, right? And that's never going out of style, and that doesn't really necessarily change, not dramatically. And so there is like a fundamental basic thing that I think was probably true in 1960, and then still in the 80s when I was there, and then probably in the in the 2020s now. But yeah, a lot of things have changed around that.
Well, I'm just curious. I'm sure people must come up to you all the time, whether they say I have a son or daughter who's interested in going into the business. What kind of advice would you give them? I don't know. What do you say? Spend $50,000.
I talk to a lot of young people. I really like that. I've always loved that. I like mentoring. I like coaching. And I talk to a lot of young people, and each one is different. So it really depends on where they're headed and what they want to do. You know this, Kenny. There's no secret formula. There's no data analysis you can print out.
No, but there's the big question. But the distinction now is, the big question is, it's costing me $50,000 to send them to college. That's the difference. A year. And that's where I say that, I don't know if they got a job just as a production assistant.
Of course.
Yeah. That maybe that's the way to go.
Of course. And look, I will tell you this. So when I talk to young people, and they say, I want to be a director. And I'll say to them, well, what are you directing?
Right.
And they're like, well, what do you mean? I go,
right.
Well, hey dude, I had to go to Emerson College in 1977 to get my hands on a camera.
Exactly.
Right? It didn't exist. My dad had a Super 8 camera I kind of fooled around with a little bit. But, in order to use facilities, I had to go to Emerson College and get in. Just like Bruce Springsteen had to get signed to Columbia Records to make a record. Mm-hmm. Okay, that doesn't exist today. Exactly. You can make a movie by reaching into your back pocket. So I always say to those kids, well, what are you doing? Why aren't you making a movie? Well, who's going to see it? Well, you can make it. You can put it up on YouTube, and somebody might see it. But by the way, you're never going to get. You're not serious about it if you're not directing, and you're never going to get better if you don't go out there and figure out how to direct.
Absolutely.
So, what are you doing?
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's
how's that? Get off my lawn.
Doug, I say the same thing.
Exactly.
I say that all the time. But people want to, ask me, or I'll meet somebody.
But
their kid is in some kind of $50,000 college, and they're like, well, good luck. But if you want to be a director, I would suggest you pull out your phone, come up with a good story, put it on TikTok, put it on YouTube.
And by the way, I will say, with all due respect to my alma mater and higher learning everywhere. Look, I'm a big fan of higher education, and I do think there's a lot to be gleaned by spending the money and going, and for a lot of different reasons, including the experiences. But yeah, I know plenty of people: Bob Pittman, Barry Diller, David Geffen. I mean, the list goes on. Jeffrey Katzenberg, who never went to college and just jumped in, and they kind of did okay.
Woody Allen.
So, what are you binge watching?
I gotta say, I've hit a rough patch. There's nothing I'm really into now. My wife continues to devour all kinds of British TV shows wherever she can find them on all these, Acorn and BritBox and.
Well, that's the great thing about these streaming is you're seeing all these foreign movies and.
It's unbelievable. That's actually something that's unbelievable. I can remember saying things like, "We can't use that person because they have an accent," or "No one in America will get this," and that's done. There are literally no more stigmas.
Let me recommend Spiral, the French legal drama. It's all in French. It's all subtitles.
Well, I watched my Agent, the French Agent.
Well, yeah. So the last couple I watched, and these I think everybody's probably seen these by now. Call My Agent was great.
Call My Agent.
I loved Ted Lasso. I loved Queen's Gambit, which you never could have convinced me I would like something about, a chess prodigy. I don't even play chess. The one thing that I watched early on that I've thrown out there that a lot of people haven't seen, which I think is interesting, is a show, I believe it's on Netflix. It's a Japanese/British crime drama. About 8 episodes long. It's called Haji Giri. Haji/Giri. And it's not an A. I would say it's a B+. But it's super different, especially as it goes along. And again, I don't think you've ever seen anything like it. And we kind of enjoyed that. It was sort of like a sleeper.
Are there specific memories from when we ask about MTV and Comedy Central? There's specific one big MTV moment that happened that you went, this was a real clusterfuck. this was a disaster. Like whatever the production was, I remember one time I was doing a thing with Nina Blackwood and that with Frank Zappa, and that was a clusterfuck.
Well, that's funny in concept.
Yeah, so that was bizarre.
The things, I mostly remember, when we decided to go to spring break and, we didn't know what we're doing. We're just like, let's go to spring break. That sounds like a great idea. And, we're just making it up on the spot. And we went to this, Daytona Beach, which, it's kind of a dump with all due respect to the good people, Daytona Beach. And it would always inevitably pour, just buckets on us as we literally made it up as we went along.
Yeah, absolutely.
We had we were given a little bit of money and a lot of authority and people had confidence, like, go do it. And everything would come together somehow at the last minute. And somehow, some way, for the most part, we got by the skin of our teeth. And I'm trying to remember anything like legitimately just crashing and burning.
They don't do that anymore at MTV.
I don't think so.
That's completely gone. You probably couldn't get away.
Doug, I have a question for you. Seriously, did Kenny ever piss you off? Is there ever this moment? Seriously, fuck Kenny?
By the way, I can remember the moment. And I tell Joe, I tell this to, I speak to Joe DeVoe 3 times a week, by the way. But I remember meeting Kenny. So in those days, this is 1984. We all wore suits. If you were director level or above. Mm-hmm. So I'm all of 25, and I was there to create the news department. But they all wore suits because Pittman thought that Madison Avenue would think everybody at MTV was a hippie and, pot smoking rock and rollers. And so he wanted us to have a look. So everybody wore suits. So I remember meeting Kenny and Joe standing in the hallway, and they reminded me, you ever see, there's that scene in Pinocchio where he goes to the island of
bad boys.
Yeah. And there's and the kid and the guy.
Lampwick.
There's like a group of them who walk up. They're like, "Kid, hey, you're new here. You stick with us. We will. We will."
So Kenny was like Lampwick.
That was
who was the first to turn into a donkey.
That was Kenny and Joe, and they're like, "Look, dude, just hang with us. We will take care of you. We'll make sure you don't get hurt. Just do what we do."
We were very lucky. I really was lucky that MTV came along because it did give kids who really should have just all been production assistants, give us jobs as like executive producers. Suddenly, executive producers and vice presidents and directors and producers.
Well, you had a nice culture. I was hanging out with Alan Hunter in those days. Martha Quinn would come to our
there's no
SNL
more VJs
parties.
on MTV, right? Any
that's
kid growing
gone,
up wanting to be a VJ, that's.
But Mark, by the way,
your choice.
those would be good guests on our podcast.
Oh,
you know, get Goodman on and Hunter and Martha.
Sure.
You know?
I saw Alan. I took a road trip with Joe and Brian Diamond and my pal David Cohn in Chicago a couple years ago. We had Alan's living out there. We saw Alan.
He's
I've run into Mark Goodman pre-pandemic at like some shows in New York, some concerts.
Very cool.
He's doing well.
I threw up on Martha Quinn's shoes. Do you know that? I threw up on Martha Quinn. I threw up on Martha. Yeah, at an SNL party. I was too drunk, and I don't know. I was putting the moves on her, and I think Stevie Wonder was over here, and I threw up on her. That's really all I can tell you about that story.
Stevie can't confirm that, Kenny. I guess.
What's that?
Stevie's unable to confirm the story.
Yeah.
You didn't see it.
And what
I didn't say that.
What was the biggest crisis you had at Comedy Central?
I mean, Dave Chappelle.
That's what it is. I mean, that's where I was going.
I mean, there was. By the way, you know, South Park. There were many South Park crises all the time. You know, they would do something. You know, because what would happen with South Park is pretty quickly they were just given like just do the show, make sure Standards approves it. So they would just be in touch with Standards all week. And you know, they have a very particular working style where they don't finish the show till about. I always describe them as, you know, if they were in your class in college, they were the guys who flipped the paper under the professor's door at 5 minutes of midnight. So the show would arrive, as they say, wet at the NOC. Sometimes not even all in order. So those were always ongoing.
But I was leading. I did want to talk Dave Chappelle. That's why.
All right. So Chappelle. So here's the story. I was in my wilderness years. So I was at the USA Network working with Andy Breckman, and I was getting ready to. USA got sold to NBC and Comcast. I was not in their plans, and thankfully my old pal Tom Preston invited me to come back and take my old job back at Comedy Central, which, my first thought was, wow, I've done that job before, I don't want to do that. And I was like, wait, I love those people, I love that job. Jon Stewart's still there, Colin Quinn had his own show then, my old pal Matt and Trey were still there, everybody who worked for me was still there. I was like, okay. So I go back, and literally I got there in May of 2004, and Dave Chappelle had just finished season 2 of The Chappelle Show, which was, as you might recall, the biggest thing ever.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Comedy Central did not have an option for a season 3. So my very first job was get Dave Chappelle to sign back up. So literally that's what I did upon arriving back at Comedy Central. I backed up the truck, and I gave Dave Chappelle, what famously became known as the $50 million deal.
Right.
Only to have Dave walk out on me, like 2 episodes into season 3, never to be seen again. So that was, that was crazy.
But did you ever have a sit-down conversation with him over?
I had several at the time. Not a lot. I had a couple at the time, including one infamous night where I met him over dinner at a sushi restaurant on La Cienega Boulevard, like this little hole-in-the-wall place, to stay out of sight. And then our last conversation was in a conference room at a law firm where I was sitting there with my head of business affairs and he was sitting there with his lawyer. And I remember it was not pleasant. Not between Dave and me, the lawyers were kind of going.
Yeah, well, that's it, yeah.
And I can't even remember what we were arguing. I mean, Dave basically broke his contract. I mean, it's pretty simple. And then I saw him. I didn't see him for a long time. I didn't see him or speak to him for about, so that's 2004. I want to say about 7 years, 8 years. And he was on tour. Funny or Die did this tour with him. So it was probably 11, 12 around then. And with a long list of comics, I went down to Irvine. With
to this day, could you make a guess as to what was it that he decided he needed to walk away?
I think it was pretty complicated. I mean, I think he was pretty conflicted. I think he was going through a lot personally. I think he was in a different place and a little bit of a different guy than he is today. And and he did what he did. Now, look, Dave ultimately figured it out, and nobody's a bigger winner than Dave Chappelle. He can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. He doesn't have to show up on a set every day. He doesn't have to worry about network executives like me or advertisers or standards. He's doing what he wants, when he wants, how he wants. And by the way, getting paid more than $50 million a year and, not having to show up on a set every day. I mean, he's the winner.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think everybody.
David's the winner. And he's fucking brilliant. I mean,
he is. Respect, nothing but respect. But I think whatever he did is very noble. It's not something that a lot of people could do.
I think he's talked about it a little bit, and it really, he set the bar that you're talking about by walking away from that. Who's ever going to argue with him? I mean, if you're willing to walk away from the deal that you put on the table, it's like, okay, I'm Teflon.
Which by the way,
he's the Aaron Rodgers of comedy.
By the way, in playing the long game like nobody ever has, he also just got paid by Viacom, who, as far as I can tell, did not really owe him a cent. But yet he took home a big paycheck from them recently, and God bless him. He has done it his way all the way. He's certainly taken his lumps for it, but he emerges I think a better, stronger person, and the absolute winner and one of the funniest people on the planet. But yeah, it was a difficult time. We were trying to pay him a lot of money to continue doing the show, and he kind of decided he didn't really want to do it anymore for whatever reason, and it got complicated and crazy. And but I like I said, I managed to see him several times over the last couple of years, and he's always been great. We and glad to see me, and I think he feels like he's in a different place, and life goes on.
Now you mentioned Viacom, and what was your title? Your Viacom title? It was like president.
My last title, I was the president of the entertainment group, Viacom Music and Entertainment Group.
And did you get to have an audience with Sumner Redstone?
Honestly, rarely. I worked there for 2 different times for probably over 25 years. And, I never got to the Tom Freston level or even the Judy McGrath level, honestly. I was like just below that. And every time I'd see Sumner, somebody would whisper in his ear, Doug Herzog. And I'd put my hand out and I'd say, Doug Herzog, and he'd reach back with that gnarled claw and he'd say, I know who you are. I'm certain he couldn't pick me out of a lineup, honestly.
I learned to do that long ago. Hi, I'm Gary Kroger. Yeah, because I don't want my ego to suffer,
Hi.
Even with my ex-wife, I say, hi, I'm Gary Kroger.
I'm just a guy here helping you become a billionaire, but don't mind me.
Yeah, there you go.
Working in the coal mines.
Yeah.
But look, I worked for Sumner, I worked for Rupert, I worked for Barry Diller. I worked for them all.
That's true.
I worked for Michael Fuchs, I worked for Jeffrey Katzenberg, I worked for Tom, I worked for Judy, I worked for Jeff Bucas, I worked for Peter Chernin. I worked for all.
I've been around a long time. I'm actually, because I was at one time when I was at MTV, I was I was able to be among the big shots there, and there was a board meeting up at 30 Rock, and it was at that time there were grievances happening for the production group from people in production. They were working overtime or whatever, and I said in this big corporate meeting that there were grievances and people had overtime things and whatever, and they laughed at it. They were so unsympathetic. They were so callous to the idea. I remember somebody in particular saying, well, let's work them harder until they quit. That was the corporate culture. And I'm just curious, though, whether or not in these people that you mentioned, you don't have to say who their name is or whatever, but that struck me a little bit, the callousness sometimes of people in that.
Well, I think MTV, honestly, they always, and maybe to this day, had this, sort of ongoing issue with, what they call freelancers and permalancers. And that was always an issue, whether you were on staff or freelancing. I found the culture, particularly in the days when we were there, Kenny, I found it very forward thinking and very progressive. Again, we're talking corporations now. We're not talking about.
Yeah, no, I wasn't picking on MTV. I'm talking about whether
versus places, like Fox. When I was there, did not find it very progressive, or even working for Barry a little bit, yes and no. But I always found it pretty progressive. By the way, there were more women in senior management, at MTV than any place I've ever been since, and I think continues to this day. The Tom Freston regime, I thought was, for the most part, again, all things being relative, very people friendly.
Well, Tom,
the Philippe Duman regime, which is the one I finished up in,
right?
The complete opposite.
Okay.
I would say that regime was callous. In that regard.
Right. Yeah. Well, on that sour note,
don't you have a sour point of view coming up here, Ken?
I do. I don't know. Yes, I do. I was thinking of.
We like to end on a sour note, Doug.
Yes, telling.
That's where we go.
Of telling. I think people like to hear some of the celebrity encounters that we've had, and I thought maybe we do. This would be an opportunity for me to do a thing where we would do bad mouth, good mouth. Where bad mouth somebody that's celebrity, or you could say something nice about them. Okay. And I want to qualify that your instant or run-in with this particular celebrity doesn't necessarily mean that they're a horrible person.
Thank you for that disclaimer.
Very specific moment.
Thank you.
It didn't work out.
The legal department will appreciate it.
No, it's true. But some people I run into, and they'll tell me a story about an incident they had with a celebrity, and they'll say, well, that person's just a horrible person. And I've said, I know them this way, and they're wonderful. But I will tell my story, and it will be a bad mouth story. I was doing a show for Fox called Sunday Comics. We were about to launch it. It was going to go on Sunday night, and it was going to follow In Living Color. Got me? Everybody with me so far? And I think possibly Joe Davola had recommended doing this, that on our launch, there would be some kind of handover from In Living Color to the launch of our show, Sunday Comics, and thought it would be a fun idea if we got me in a room and some other people from our show, some writers, in a room with the cast of In Living Color, Keenan and the producer Tomorrow and all this stuff, and sit there and say, hey, we're doing this show. The network thought that would be fun if we came up with an idea that maybe you could just in the interstitial between the two shows, do some kind of throw to our upcoming show. Now, while I'm talking, Jim Carrey.
I knew you were going to say Jim.
Gets up behind me and starts to make funny faces. Now, I'm trying to pitch or tell everybody in the room this idea. That the network wanted it. It wasn't mine. But I was trying to convince them, to get them to this could be fun, this could be. But all the time I'm doing this, Jim Carrey is making funny faces behind me and all these weird things, and everybody starts to laugh.
I'll bet they were really funny faces.
They must have been.
And you thought they were laughing at you.
No, I just thought I was being embarrassed and humiliated because I was being dismissed as this is ridiculous. I'm not going to sit here. And he just made funny faces and everything. And then people started to and then Keenan got up and walked out, and I was left embarrassed. And to this day, I will tell you, I am bad-mouthing. I think that was an asshole move.
That was an asshole move. That was an asshole move.
That's all.
That was an asshole. All right. Yeah, Doug, good or bad?
Doug will never badmouth anybody.
Well, I got a couple. I just don't know that they're interesting. I just
figure out which one.
Here's what I can tell you. Every time, and Kenny might remember this too. Every time the former John Cougar, then John Cougar Mellencamp, would show up on MTV to do something, it would always end in tears. He would make some poor female production assistant cry through yelling or humiliation or just throwing a temper tantrum. And it never failed. Every time he showed up, somebody cried. Somebody's going to cry. But my good mouth story is not going to surprise anybody because this is the brand of this particular person. In 1981, I started as an intern. I was working at Cable News Network, which, by the way, you have to remember, nobody had cable TV. Nobody knew who Ted Turner was unless you knew what the America's Cup was. Everybody thought a 24-hour news network was a terrible idea. It was a startup that they didn't call startup. I was in the LA bureau. We worked out of the 17th floor of the tower at Sunset and Vine, and we would do a nightly celebrity talk show from the 10th floor of an office building in Hollywood in 1980, 81 through like 83. So you can imagine the kind of guests we get. Using 2 cameras that came in that were used, for news all day, and we just screw them onto tripods, and we'd shoot this way and out the window, and mostly they didn't match. Everybody in Atlanta, it was 1 a.m. in Atlanta, all the brass was asleep. And so there were 4 or 5 20-somethings producing the show every night. It was great. So we would have all these people up that we could find and who would actually come up and get booked. And, that's how I met Howie Mandel. That's how I met Pee Wee Herman, Paul Rubens, who's a friend to this day. I still get a Christmas card from Paul every year. It's amazing, like 35 years later, whatever it is. And I met a very young Tom Hanks, who was the co-star of Bosom Buddies, and he loved doing the show so much. The host was a guy named Lee Leonard, who you might remember. I
remember Lee Leonard, yeah.
Sports Extra, and now that I look back, Tom was like rehearsing. He was like practicing for Carson. He just loved sitting there and going back and forth and having the anecdote. He's a very young guy, and he gave me his home phone number, and he said, if anybody ever cancels, just call me. I'd love to do this stuff.
Wow.
And so he would come up all the time. I actually remember calling him last minute one night, and he came up with his first wife and his son, who's now the actor. Not Chet Hanks, the white boy summer guy, but the
right. Not the one in trouble.
The other guy. And so over the years, I would run into Tom Hanks, all over. Like I'd run into, wherever it was, New York, L.A. He actually, doesn't live far from me here in L.A. And every once in a while, he would actually remember my name, or somebody might prompt him. But most often than not, he would go, "Hey, it's the CNN guy." And he would chat me up for a few minutes and ask me how I was doing and what I was up to. Probably the last time was not long before, COVID hit, over here in Hollywood. And he's just always the loveliest guy and never forget. And, always ask me things like, whatever happened to Lee Leonard, or, great guy.
Well, I have not gotten anything from Jim Carrey, not a card, not a call, and not an apology, nothing. Fuck him.
Well,
I'll give you one bad mouth.
Okay.
So what was the name of the woman who played the wife on Everybody Loves Raymond?
Yes.
Lisa Rihanna? No.
Right, Patty.
Patty Heaton. No,
Patricia Heaton. Right, Patricia Heaton. So one day I'm at Comedy Central. This was in the second round, so in the early 2000s, I guess, or mid 2000s. We had just launched an animated show called Drawn Together. It was basically a parody of reality TV in the real world, where all these animated characters live together. And we had billboards all over town. And in the billboard, it was the cast of animated characters sitting around a hot tub. And in the hot tub are 2 of the female characters, and they're tongue kissing. And so one day, the phone rings, and my sister comes in. She goes, "Doug, it's Patricia Heaton on the phone." And I go, "Really? What does she want?" And I pick up the phone. I go, "Hi." I go, "Hi." She goes, "Patty Heaton here." I go, "Hi, Patty." She goes, "I have a big problem." I go, "What's your problem?" She says, "Well, you have a billboard on Lafayette Boulevard that's, blah, 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 blah. And that is the way I take my kids to school every day. And I have a big problem with it. And you need to take it down. And what are you thinking? And who are you people? Blah, 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 blah. And I finally just said, "Hey, you know what? I appreciate it, but not my problem. And you're going to need to find another way to get your kids to school."
Really?
So, there are other paths.
Thank you very much, Patty. appreciate the input.
All right, I'm going to end with a trash.
Good boy.
I know that makes Ken very happy. He expects me to be.
It's not me. I do it for the people. This is what the people want to hear.
If there's one celebrity that I admire, it's Tom Hanks, and I would love to think that I'm a very poor man, C-level Tom Hanks. But in my world, I like to be positive. However, people kind of know this story, but Robert Blake hosted Saturday Night Live, and I wrote a sketch with Brad Hall, and I don't remember the sketch, but he was Beretta, and he had a cockatoo that was intelligent, and he was Beretta teaching Shakespeare in college, and the cockatoo. This doesn't even sound funny, but it was a reasonably funny sketch making fun of Beretta.
It had the word cock in it.
And it had the word cock in it. So he reads this at the Monday pitch meeting with the host, and, it's got my name on it, and it's "Here, Mr. Blake." and he reads it, and he goes, and he wipes his ass with it, and then he throws it into my face. It's just that's what I think of the script.
Wait, so you think Robert Blake was a bad guy?
Well, I was saying, on the upside, he didn't kill you.
Well, that's the point. You see, there is a silver lining.
You just badmouthed the murderer.
A lot of people.
That's a big surprise.
A lot of people thought that I must feel terrible. People have told the story before. Poor Gary Kroger.
So your point is Robert Blake's a bad guy?
Yeah.
I figured that's show business. I figured when a celebrity doesn't like what you do, they wipe their ass with it and throw it at you.
Actually, I can't.
Well, that's shocking.
I can't give you shit. You're like, Robert Blake's a bad guy. I did a story where like Tom Hanks is a good guy. Like, oh, big surprise.
Well, and not that, but anyway, yeah, he's kind of a bad guy. I was literally next to him at Vitello's it's not in Sherman Oaks, in Studio City, with his wife. I'm having dinner with my girlfriend. We leave. We pass the trash can and the car and all of the places where moments later he killed his wife, presumably.
Wait, you were there the night he killed his wife?
I was there going, oh my God, that's Robert Blake. And he came back because he left his gun.
Okay, I just want to say, I watch all these documentaries, like, my wife just watched the one of Son of Sam. They have all this new evidence, allegedly. Yeah. I'm watching this Manson thing, more new evidence. I'm going to say, if I were the police, he wiped his ass and threw it in your face. You now have motive. You must set him up.
I think he intended to shoot me. He didn't finish the business in New York.
Or you might have done it and set him up.
You know what? This is a perfect ending. No, this is perfect. And I think that you're coming out of retirement after 40 years. This is a show.
Thank you so much, Doug. This was fun. I had a good time.
It was good to call me tomorrow. I'm blown.
Seriously, thank you for an hour well spent. It's really been a joy seeing you again after all these years. We were such good friends back in the MTV days.
Can we stop taping so I can ask Kenny a couple more questions before we?
Yeah, hang on one second. Let me say goodbye to everybody. All right. Thank you for watching the Gary and Kenny Show. Doug Herzog has been our guest.
They're listening, Gary. It's a podcast.
Okay, but I'm looking at a lens. We do this on YouTube
but
too.
Most people are listening.
The listening people will understand.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you for listening or watching. We are on all the podcast platforms, iHeartRadio, Apple, so on and so forth, all of Spotify. And as
you really should write this down, Gary.
And has pointed out, we're also on YouTube. So anyway, we'll see you next time.